Hello, my name is Philip Lipsey, for those of you who don't know me, and I direct the Center for the Study of Global Japan here at the University of Toronto. Thank you for joining our event today on a new chapter in Canada-Japan relations, a giant leap forward in light of geopolitical realities and global challenges, featuring His Excellency Kanji Yamanouchi, the Ambassador of Japan to Canada. Before we begin, I would like to deliver a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I would also like to extend my gratitude to Second Secretary Suguru Hayashida from the Japanese Embassy, Sophie Bora-Klein, Ria Ayama, Sakura Armstrong, and the Monk School events team for their administrative support of today's event. In addition, we have a few upcoming events for those of you who don't typically come to CSGJ events. On October 11th, we'll have an online webinar in collaboration with University of British Columbia on Japanese politics at a crucial transition point, focused on the new Prime Minister and upcoming election. So we can continue the conversation online there. On October 22nd, we'll have Mireya Solis from the Brookings Institution to talk about her new book, Japan's Quiet Leadership, Reshaping the Indo-Pacific. On November 19th, we'll have Sadia Pekkanen from University of Washington on Japan's grand strategy in space. And on November 22nd, we'll have another webinar event on Japan-South Korea relations. So just to give you a taste of things that are upcoming in the near future at our center. Okay, so today we very much stand in a moment of major political transitions. South of the border, we're less than a month away now, hard to believe, from a US presidential election that is very much in a statistical dead heat by all accounts, between two candidates with, shall we say, very different perspectives on the role of America in the world, on issues ranging from the wars ongoing in Ukraine and the Middle East, how to manage the rise of China, as well as whether or not climate change represents an existential threat to humanity. Last week, of course, Japan saw a new prime minister, Shigeru Ishiba, come to power. Ishiba has bold ideas like the creation of a so-called Asian NATO and a more equal alliance partnership with the United States. In recent years, as the ambassador I'm sure will discuss, Japan has stepped up as a global thought leader by, among other things, proposing the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific, which has influenced foreign policy thinking in many countries, including the one in which we stand here today. However, Ishiba's ideas so far seem to have received a more cautious reception in foreign capitals. And the prime minister has also faced criticism from within his own party and confronts an immediate test in a pivotal lower house election to be held on October 27th. So there's very much a lot going on in Japanese politics. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has overseen the development of Canada's first Indo-Pacific strategy, which among other things promises an increased diplomatic and military presence with funding to go along with it in the region and deeper cooperation with key partners, including Japan, among others. However, the Prime Minister is himself very much on the defensive at home, with public opinion polls indicating deep dissatisfaction and probable change in leadership should an election be held today. So as these global challenges mount and intensify, what are the fundamental underpinnings of Canada-Japan relations? What are the most promising areas for cooperation and collaboration to meet those challenges? What can be done to strengthen the resilience of the relationship amidst the political transitions that various countries are facing? To address these questions and more, who would be a better speaker than the one we've welcomed today? It's my pleasure to introduce His Excellency Kanji Yamanouchi, the Ambassador of Japan to Canada. Ambassador Yamanouchi has a long and distinguished career in the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including service as Ambassador, Consul-General of Japan in New York, Director of the First North America Division, Executive Assistant to the Japanese Prime Minister, and postings in Canada, the United States, and Korea, among many others. He graduated from Tokyo University of Foreign Studies and received his master's degree in political science from Wesleyan University. As many of my students in the audience know, Ambassador Yamanouchi is also an exceptionally talented rock guitarist whose Jimi Hendrix-inspired renditions of the Canadian and US national anthems have been variously described by the Hill Times as quote unquote shredding and the New York Post as crushing. His YouTube performances have become viral sensations and collected hundreds of thousands of views, literally. Unfortunately, we don't have time to accommodate a live performance today, but we very much look forward to the next opportunity. Ambassador, welcome to the Monk School.
If you had asked me to bring my guitar, I would have brought my guitar with amplifier.
Okay, I'll keep that.
But yeah, maybe next opportunity. So thank you so much for making arrangement. Do you hear me? It's loud enough? So today, the topic is new chapter in Canada-Japan relations. This topic tells almost everything I want to say. But here today, I think I have like a 45 minutes or 50 minutes to talk myself. Then we'll have discussion and taking the questions. So I would like to share with you what's going on now between Canada and Japan. Businesses, politics, and academia, research and development, and even self-defense forces. And then myself and many of my colleagues and also my predecessors of both Japanese ambassador to Canada or Canadian ambassador to Japan share the view that today's Canada-Japan relations is better than ever. I think this is the right statement given the sort of fact that we've been taking a look. Then I would like to share what's going on between our two countries. And also I'd like to share that is not the happening. That is not coincidental. It's more like an inevitable thing. And I'd like to share why today's Canada-Japan relation is so deepened. What is the background? What is the element in international relations? So first, I would like to share with you today's world. So just for the food for the thought, we would like to compare today with 10 years ago with 5 elements. The one is geopolitics. The second is global governance. The third, global warming. And fourth, technology. And fifth, global health. Each of those 5 elements determine what we are now. Then in geopolitics, we've been facing very serious conflict in Middle East and Ukraine. And we have observed today many attempts to change status quo by utilizing force unilaterally, not based on the rule of law. The rule of law of the concept and global rule being challenged very seriously. We see so many examples here and there today. 10 years ago, we didn't have Ukraine. G7 was G8 until Russia invaded Crimea. But today, we do have all those very complicated geopolitical realities. When it comes to the global governance, today we are talking about global South. And G7 been playing key role even today, but if we compare the GDP share of G7 to the world GDP, today it's less than half. 10 years ago, it's about 60%. 20 years ago, 70%. 40 years ago, about almost 80% of the world GDP was shared by only G7 countries. US, Japan alone counted for 40% of the GDP for 30 years ago. But that share has been very much shrinked. And 10 years ago, we didn't question much about the US leadership in global stage. But today, the Lipsy Sensei just mentioned, we have been watching what's going on inside the United States, very serious conflict domestically. That is probably the American democracy in action. But when it comes to the world leadership, it's been very much difficult to see because we have experienced 4 years between 2017 to 2021. And then also talking about the global warming. Today, we have Paris Accord, and more than 140 countries have committed carbon neutral by 2050. 10 years ago, still Paris Accord was under the negotiation, and even under the Kyoto Protocol. And some countries questioned the global warming itself. So all those norms of society and businesses are not so much with the decarbonization. But today, every company has to think of the decarbonization. The country has already committed carbon neutral by 2050. That has transformed so many things, the way we do business, the way we formulate the policies. And finally, global health. 10 years ago, people believed the development of the medical sciences and the technologies, we can almost address all those difficult diseases. But we have just know COVID-19 paralyzed almost all the economic activities and social societies after 2020. So all in all, we are living in a more complicated, more difficult, and more uncertain, and more unpredictable world today. We see a very harsh reality of geopolitics and the harsh consequences of global warming. Then we can think, now, who we could trust? I think that is a very important question. Some people say the friend in need is a friend indeed. Or in a very difficult situation, the true face will reveal. So in a very peaceful time, everybody can be friends. But in a difficult times, you think who you can trust or you cannot. So that is the sort of the situation we are living today. Then in this given very difficult situation, a country like Japan, will have to think very hard how to maintain our peace, stability, and prosperity in this given very difficult world. So then we come up with basically 4 ideas. One, we have to make sure that we will develop our own ability to businesses, economic power, and also defend ourselves, and cultural power and anything. So we try to do better by ourselves. But you know, the things Japan can do alone is very much limited. So we have to think of their foreign policy and security policy with the friends. Then, so naturally, the most important thing is in those terms, the foreign policy and security policy. US-Japan alliance is a cornerstone of Japan's security policy and foreign policy. So the national strategy is to enhance our alliance very much. But at the same time, we have known the reality of the country. I have just mentioned certain difficulty of the leadership of today's US. I'm hoping and I'm confident down the road, the United States will overcome certain difficulties today. In the past 250 years, the country has been always overcome the difficulties in different times. So, but as of today, we see the reality. So naturally, we have to enhance our own relations and cooperation and partnership with like-minded countries, almost allied countries. Then Canada is top of the list. Canada and Australia, I think, the top of the list of the like-minded countries that Japan need to enhance. And the fourth element of the national strategy is to actively participate in the decision-making of the international community and rule-making. I think that determines the future game. Therefore, Japan have to be the part of those decision-making and rule-making. But Japan alone cannot. So together with allies and friends and partners, we do that. So our own effort, the US alliance and like-minded countries and rule-making, that is basically four elements of the national strategy to survive and to enhance our stability and prosperity in this given difficult times. And most likely, the Canadian national strategy is pretty much similar, because the Canada have to develop by its own. But at the same time, reality is 75% of the export and 50% of import of this country are with the United States. And all those defenses, and there's more than 8,000 kilometers of neighbor to neighbor, and this is inevitable. But at the same time, so Canada is now seeking the further cooperation and partnership besides the United States. And Japan is at the top of the list. So I would like to mention the four basic documents to prove. So from the Japanese side, the Canada is getting more and more important, because in this given difficult situation, we think Canada is a friend we can trust. And from the Canadian point of view, it's similar. So the one of the most important documentation is Lipsy Sensei just mentioned, the Canadian Indo-Pacific strategy, which was issued November 2022. And given their historical background and geography, the Canada has been associated more with Atlantic Ocean and European countries. But in the first time after the 160 some years after the Confederation, this country formed its own national strategy for Indo-Pacific looking west. So that is a fundamental change. And when Indo-Pacific strategy is mentioned, Japan is cornerstone of it. Of course, China is important, India is important, but you have some sensitivities and difficulties to deal with those two big populous countries. With Japan, you don't have that kind of sensitivity. We're a very natural partner. And besides this Indo-Pacific strategy by Canadian government, the Japanese government also issued new version of national strategy, the statement of national strategy. That is, stipulates all those elements, political, economical, and defense, and so on. And very significant documentation by two governments is action plan for contributing to free and open Indo-Pacific. That was issued October 2022, slightly before the Canadian issuance of Indo-Pacific strategy. But based upon this action plan, it's the clear documentation of both governments based upon the very similar or almost the same identical strategic ideas. We are on the same page. And this action plan consists of 6 areas. And those are priority 6 areas. It's very important areas in peacekeeping, rule of law, and economic affairs, and economic security, and global warming, research and development, and food security and health, global health, etc. So those set Indo-Pacific strategy, Japanese national strategy, and action plan issued in the autumn of 2022. Those are just the papers. But one very important action was following those 3 documentation, September last year, 2023. If you remember, the Minister of Industry, METI, Minister of Industry and Trade, Economy and Trade, Minister Nishimura visited Ottawa only 24 hours stay because it was a very politically sensitive times, but he did his best effort to come to Ottawa, only Ottawa for 24 hours. And he signed 2 documents. This is a kind of a one set of documentation, but 2 parts. That is the memorandum of cooperation. And Mr. Nishimura met with the separately and jointly the 3 cabinet members of Canadian government, Minister Champagne, and Minister Wilkinson, and Minister In. So international trade and natural resources and the industry and industry and I said means in industry innovation and something. But anyway, so, Minister Champagne and Minister In and Minister Wilkinson and Minister Nishimura. So I personally quote the Japan-Canada quartet of cabinet members to deal with the economy and the business and trade. And 2 memorandum of understanding is one's battery, lithium battery, which is a critical element for decarbonization of the industry. And second, the memorandum of understanding is high-tech industry technology, including computer chip, semiconductor, and AI, quantum, and nanotechnologies, and life sciences. So this very specific battery and more widely sort of forward-looking high-tech, those are set. And the signing ceremony was very, very, I think, I would say, making the new way for the Japanese companies and Canadian companies. And actually, this ceremony was joined by the Canadian companies and Japanese companies. So they are seeing this documentation, not just a paper signed by two countries, but by the sort of introduction of further action in the businesses. Then I would like to share one very interesting example of the things. That is the zero emission vehicle. So I'm talking about the complicated geopolitics and the consequences of the global warming. And one of the most important element is that this zero emission vehicle, because this is an intersection of global warming and geopolitics. I'm telling you why. And as I just mentioned, 10 years ago, other countries were still negotiating the Paris Accord. But today, more than 190 countries signed, including the US. Who knows after the November 5th, but at least the US is with us. And more than 140 countries have committed carbon neutral by 2050. That is a deal. And so in order to achieve this carbon neutral by 2050, we have to think hard. We have to do whatever we can do. But the reality is 25% of the emission gas are from transportation sector. That means cars. And in any countries, the automobile is a major part of the industries. Therefore, if this 25% of the whole emission gas, if all the cars are becoming the zero emission vehicle, that is great contribution to the decarbonization. Therefore, all the major countries and companies are seeking for zero emission vehicle. Of course, there's a certain sort of little questions. What is a zero emission vehicle? The definition of zero emission vehicle is legal matters, and there is a certain sort of sensitivity. But for the time being, so forget it. Zero emission vehicle is significantly important. And for example, electric vehicle is one of the most important zero emission vehicle today. Then think of this way. If you have to have the good zero emission vehicle or electric car, you have to have very good quality of lithium battery. That is more than 40% of the cost of the electric vehicle. So if you have to have, when you have to have the good lithium battery, you have to have the critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, and others. And if you see the world market today, more than 70% of those critical minerals are controlled by certain countries, which are not sharing the basic values like human rights, rule of law, or democracy. That means 75% is controlled by those different regime countries. They can use the dependence of other countries for their political purposes. Or if you don't agree with me, I don't export you. That is a very significant potential risk for those companies who are making the zero emission vehicle. Therefore, all those countries and companies are seeking who we could trust. Then Canada is a single most important country in that terms. Because in this country, you do have an enormous amount of the critical minerals. We know that. And I'm talking with some Japanese companies who are also making this lithium-ion batteries. So they are importing the various stones and minerals from many other countries. But Canada has a potential, which is own single country in the earth where the company can get the stone from the mountain and refine it, making the final product, and install into the car. The full value chain can be completed in single country, that is Canada. Therefore, all those companies are seeking the great potential of this country. Then here's one amazing person, I think, the future candidate of this country's prime minister, that is François-Philippe Champagne. He is now the Ministry of Industry. So years ago, he started to say, from mountain to motor vehicle. He sees this great sort of value chain in this country. Then that was his ideas, he's saying to friends. And now, if you remember, April 25th, the Honda made a huge announcement, their decision to make investment to this country, if you remember. And this was the ceremony and press conference was live broadcasted by CBC and other TV stations. And Prime Minister Trudeau, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, and Minister Champagne, and also Premier Doug Ford, and the Minister Fedeli, and a bunch of all those members of the parliament and mayors and others came together. And I was also honored to be there. Then the great announcement. The amount is $15 billion. That is the single most biggest investment to the history of Ontario, and the biggest investment in automobile sector of this country, and biggest investment by single company in history of Canada. So it's enormous. So, and also the more important thing is that this idea, the Honda made it very clear that they have a plan to complete full value chain of making electric vehicle in this country. So this is a revolutionary change. Think of this way. I just started with a comparison between 10 years ago and today. 10 years ago, all those companies been having the strategy to build their global supply chain, making the different parts in different countries so that they can get a very efficient way to get all those parts. Then, based upon the global supply chain, they can get timely and most efficient production. 10 years ago, that was a golden formula for the great management and the production of the major companies. But today, not many companies believe that because we have already known pandemic so disrupted the supply chain so much. One very interesting anecdote is there was December 2021, I think. In Japan, McDonald's is very popular. All those young people, those people eat it. And French fry, the fried potato, it's a very important part. But suddenly, the Japanese McDonald's announced that we can't supply you the large size or medium size, only small size, because the disruption of the supply chain. This is not by the Ukraine, 2 months before the Ukraine crisis, only because of the flood in Vancouver area. So the port function was very much disrupted. So suddenly the Canadian side cannot export French fry. The McDonald's French fry was basically the McCain food by Canadian companies. By the way, 25% of the French fry, the fried potato is made by McCain company. I spent more than 10 years, and in the United States, when we say McCain, that means Senator John McCain. But in this country, McCain means McCain food, so much so. Then that was it lasted only 2 months or so. There was already, the problem was solved. But yeah, that tells the supply chain could be very, very vulnerable by natural disaster or geopolitical, so political things or risks and economic security and pandemic. Therefore, the Honda changed its strategy completely. Then they chose Canada. I think it means a lot. But having said that, I think it is only fair to see the both bright side and not so bright side too. So I would say there is a big challenge for this country, despite the great potentials. That is, I think, 4 challenges. If I say regarding the critical minerals, one is lack of infrastructure. Most of those mountains there's northern side. In order to develop it, you have to have the road, you have to have the certain facilities. But the infrastructure is so much enough. It's not enough. And second, that this country is very much friendly to all those procedures and regulations for the sake of the environmental consideration and others. But in the eyes of the businesses, it takes a long time to get that authorization and to complete the procedures. And in business, time is money. And of course, a certain regulation is necessary, but you can streamline it. So this streamlined regulation is very, very important. And third, this is a very serious challenge for this country and another dark side of the history, because most of the land of the critical minerals are associated with the indigenous groups. And so it is never easy to get the understanding and support from the indigenous people group. And I think that is very, very important. Things are changing for the positive side, and it's changing for the better. But still, the reality is it's never easy to get the support of whole indigenous groups. And the fourth challenge is coordination between federal government and provincial government, or between provincial governments. So it's never easy. So this infrastructure, regulation, and the indigenous groups and federal and province relations, those are challenges. But I don't mean that those challenges cannot be met. I think this can be addressed and things are moving right direction. But I will give you one good example. But maybe not good example, but example regarding this challenges. So that is the great potential for this country. Think of Alberta. So we are talking about the decarbonization. Therefore, new source of energy like hydrogen or ammonia are very, very critical. And this could be great potential for this country. Because in Alberta, you can produce blue ammonia or blue hydrogen in a very competitive prices. Because in Alberta, enough shale gas and oil, which is a sort of ingredient of the ammonia and hydrogen. And in Alberta, they do have the great function of the carbon capture storage. Therefore, when the factory makes the hydrogen or ammonia, they got the CO2s, but almost more than 90% of the CO2s are captured by this CCS facility. Therefore, we can produce blue ammonia, blue hydrogen with very competitive prices in the world market. And so if we think of the Japanese market, those blue ammonia or blue hydrogen can be exported from the Prince Rupert of British Columbia to Japan. And this is about 10 days. And between Prince Rupert to Japan, so no choke point, I would say. No complicated geopolitical difficulties. Here's the Canada, Alaska, Kamchatka Peninsula, then Japan, 10 days. And no pilots and no typhoons. So this is very competitive route. So think of this way, if you export the blue hydrogen or ammonia or anything from the east coast of the North American continent, you have to go through Panama. So it takes 40 days from east coast to Japan. 40 days versus 10 days. It's very competitive. And if we compare with the transportation from Australia to Japan, it's about 10 days same. But from Australia to Japan, you have to go through equators. That means you have the potential risk of typhoon or hurricane or cyclone. And so enormous numbers of the pilots activities are reported. And also South China Sea area, the geopolitically very, very sensitive and complicated. Therefore, this 10 days from Prince Rupert to Japan is unbeatable. The question is how you transport this competitive price of blue ammonia, blue hydrogen from Alberta to Prince Rupert. Inland transportation. This is a very, very challenging sort of things. I met all those Japanese companies, 4 or 5 companies. They see a great potential for exporting this blue ammonia, blue hydrogen from Canada to Japan, from Alberta to Japan. But the question is this transportation between Alberta to Prince Rupert. Regulations and understanding from the First Nation groups and our also infrastructure in a sense. So this and also two different provinces and the federal government coordination. So I really hope those challenges would be addressed sooner. Then challenges there, but I'm hoping that challenge will be met. But having said that, I would say the Canada has enormous advantage of doing a business and also becoming the destination of the major investment by companies outside Japan, the US, or European countries. And I'll give you one very good example of testimony of the Canadian advantage in a press conference at the this is May 14th. If you remember, there's a Japanese company called Asahi Kasei. That is the top company to produce very good separator for lithium battery. So after Honda, Asahi Kasei made a decision to come to Ontario, Port Colborne. And it's about $1.5 billion big investment. Single biggest investment in the history of this Port Colborne. Then Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Champagne, Premier Doug Ford, and Minister Fedeli, and myself joined the ceremony and press conference. Then in the press conference, one reporter from Canadian side asked a question, very simple question, but I think it's a very insightful question. That is to Asahi Kasei, the president, why you chose Canada as a destination? Very simple question, because Port Colborne is not the industrial city yet. And the answer of Asahi Kasei's president is very honest. He said, yes, first candidate of the destination was not Canada, was France. Then they check, they due diligence, a lot of things. Then, well, may not be France. So the second candidate was the United States. So then Asahi Kasei's board member almost decided to go to the United States. But in the final sort of meeting, the one board member said, well, the US is okay, but why don't we check Canada? So Canada was like a third candidate, but they checked all those elements for the investment. Then finally, they chose Canada as a destination. The first outside of Japan full factory to produce wet separator. That will be provided to the automobile companies producing the electric vehicle, not only Honda, not only the Japanese companies, to the US companies and other companies. So that tells something. So this president or company of Asahi Kasei, as well as Honda, they know that this is a country they have to come. So then hearing all those stories, I would say, from my point of view, there are 5 major elements of the advantage of Canada to invite investment from foreign countries. One, that is, this is a part of the world's biggest market, North America. That you have a free trade agreement with the US and Mexico. Therefore, this is a single market. More than 500 million people living here. And $35 trillion, the biggest market. So Canada is part of it. So that is a very, very great charm for the companies. The second element, as I just mentioned, this country is a single, only country where critical mineral can be digged, defined, and produced, and installed. So not only critical minerals, but many other natural resources. That is an amazing thing. The third, in this country, from the company's point of view, they can get super smart people and also very people on the ground. The various sort of, what can I say, patterns of the working. Because of this effective migration policy, you have enormous diversities and good quality of working people in this market. And if we compare with the prices in the United States, say for super smart people like us from University of Toronto, probably if the company hires those people in the United States, so probably 30% more expensive. The same quality, but 30% less here. That is a very, very important element for the companies. But anyway, the good quality of labor. And the fourth element is stability of this country and politics and policy. So Inflation Reduction Act had an enormous impact for the major companies of the world. But now people are questioning that IRA would continue or would terminate it or not. So that unpredictable thing is a very difficult element for the companies. But in this country, of course, Canada is also a democratic country. You have liberal and conservative. There are certain differences. But if I compare with the differences between Republican and conservative, it's much sort of in the middle. And so in the eyes of the companies from foreign countries, Canada, the policy and politics are very much stable compared. This is a matter of the comparison, but yeah, that is a very important element. And the fifth, and this country, very welcoming and enthusiastic to invite foreign investment. So to Honda or to Asahi Kasei or to many other like Volkswagen and Stellantis, this country give an enormous amount of incentives, tax credit, or the security fund. So I think that is all in all the Canada, the enormous advantage for the investment from foreign countries. And I would personally add one more element on the ability of high tech. So as of today, I should say congratulations to University of Toronto, because Professor Jeffrey Hinton has a Nobel Prize. But I have known him some years. Then I checked his biography and his career. It's amazing. Probably many of you know, but I just want to say it. He was born in Wimbledon, in UK, got a Cambridge and University of Edinburgh. He got a PhD for neural network, but he couldn't find a job for his his research. So he went to the United States, first Southern California University, then Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania. But he only stayed there like 5 years or something in the United States. Then Jeffrey Hinton came to Toronto, 1987. At that time, no one knew him. No one paid attention to his study on neural network, what it is. And whenever he wrote a thesis and essay to submit to the magazines like Nature or Science, his thesis was not carried, always. 25 years later, 2012, there was one international competition on the facial and image recognition called I forgot the title now. But 2012, that's the competition. The University of Toronto won with a big margin against MIT, Stanford, or Cambridge. People were astonished. Oh, the competition, the name is ImageNet. That is a kind of facial recognition. Then with big margin, University of Toronto won. The people were surprised, what's going on here? Then now we know deep learning or machine learning. That was his sort of invention or his discovery. So now, 12 years later after that, so he got Nobel Prize. But what I want to say is, before he became very famous after 2012 victory of ImageNet, 25 years, University of Toronto and the Canadian government supported him without knowing his research becoming such a wonderful thing or not. I think that is the power of this country to embrace also something new. And if we think of the BlackBerry 2, Michael Atadidis, now he's doing the quantum computing a lot, but he started it early 21st century. He established Perimeter Institute, 2002. Then the government also supported it. So before any other country supported it. And the other amazing thing is, I would say this major, I would say Canadian researchers like Jeffrey Hinton or Joshua Bengio or Richard Sutton, by the way, who made the AlphaGo, which beat the world champion of Go, AI victory over human beings, and Richard Sutton and Michael Atadidis. None of them were born here. The Richard Sutton from US, Jeffrey Hinton from UK, Joshua Bengio from France, and Michael Atadidis from Turkey. But I think this is the power of this country, I really think. So today's Nobel Prize is, I just want to say congratulations to this country's great ability to embrace something new before many other people discover it. Then the time is running out, but I just want to share with you the recent development of Canada-Japan relations in 5 areas. One, business. I just mentioned the Honda and Asahi Kasei. Many other companies, like Mitsubishi is having a contract with Frontier Lithium, that is a lithium company. And also Panasonic and Mitsui has the contract with NHG, that is producing graphite. And Marubeni has a contract with Manitoba. They have a digging all those mountains. And Sumitomo Kinzoku Kosan, that is has a contract with the Nan1 company, that is a Canadian startup. And so many investments going on. And also I want to add two more very interesting investment or the collaboration between Japanese companies and Canadian companies. One is the Japanese computer chip company called Rapidus. That is a new company created by the 8 major Japanese companies built. That is a huge company producing the computer chip for AI. Their target is 2 nanometers, very thin, and most advanced computer chip for AI, mass production. But this big Japanese company, Rapidus, had a contract with a Canadian startup called Tenstrand. This is a startup, small company, designing the computer chip for the AI. And the head of this Tenstrand is Mr. Jim Keller. Mr. Jim Keller is a legendary designer for a computer chip who designed the Apple computer years ago. But now he's here and in Toronto and established a starting up company in Canada. And big Japanese companies having a contract with this startup from Canada and so shaping the future. And this is a marvelous, marvelous thing. But their target is 2027 for the mass production of 2 nanometers AI computer chip. So it's going on. It's very competitive. Many other companies are also seeking the same top-notch thing. But I'm hoping that this Canada-Japan alliance will get a victory with the market. And just an interesting collaboration is the opposite. Canadian nuclear laboratories, that is supported by the government and nuclear technologies. But this Canadian the big company or laboratories has a contract with a Japanese startup. Name is Kyoto Fusion Valley. This is a startup from Japanese companies. What they are targeting is fusioning nuclear power production. That is like a future energy. It's very forward-looking. But this is, it's not happening tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It takes years. But still, the big Canadian corporation, the laboratories, with a Japanese startup. This is a nice combination. So it's so many things going on between the Japanese companies and Canadian companies and businesses. Then I would like to move to the cooperation between the self-defense forces of Japan and the Canadian forces. There's if we see the numbers of the joint exercises, in the past 5 years, the numbers been increasing a lot. And Canada and Japan created the bilateral joint exercise called Kaedex. If you know the Japanese, Kaede is NATO. So this Zietai and the Canadian forces name it Kaedex. It's like a very friendly thing, but they are doing very much advanced joint exercises. And also together with the US and multilateral joint exercises, Canada has been always participating. Sometimes when say Pacific Rim or many other names, the US or Japan is the biggest provider for the military asset. But Canada is most likely the third place to come with the military asset. That means a lot. And if we see the Operation Neon, that is to watch the ship-to-ship transfer by North Korea, which is prohibited by the United Nations Security Council. Therefore, all those multilateral forces are observing and checking. And Canada has been providing the military asset to do that, to follow that United Nations resolution. But the amazing thing is, Canada provided 2 frigates and 1 Aurora, CP-140, that is reconnaissance airplanes. But these 2 frigates means a lot to Canadian Navy. I would say why? Because Canadian Navy has 12 frigates. That is the biggest like a battleship. in Canadian Navy. 7 of them are deployed in the Atlantic side. 5 of them are deployed in the Pacific side. Out of that 5, 2 frigates are simultaneously dispatched to the waters surrounding Japan. In military thinking, that is a huge commitment. Because if you have 5 frigates, one is always repairing or maintaining. The one is using for the practices and exercising. The one is for their regular duty. Usually one for the emergency, but 2 of them were sent to the waters surrounding Japan. That is huge commitment by Canadian forces. So we really appreciate it. And on top of that, now the Canadian government decided to send 3 frigates, 2 from Pacific, the 1 from Atlantic. So that is, so Indo-Pacific strategy is not just a word. So it's approved by action in the military forms. I think that is huge. And also now, so all those experts on security affairs are thinking new domain. That is ground, air, water, and cyber security and space. But when it comes to the cyberspace, that is very significant for the safety of our social lives, so banks and electricity and hospitals. And cyber security is always very, very significant because some other countries, we don't know which, but we can guess, cyber attacks all the time. So we have to enhance our ability to protect cyber security. Then Canada-Japan cyber security joint collaboration is very, very serious. And they established the code name Cyber Masakari. Masakari is a Japanese, like, so if you cut the weed, they call it Masakari. The Cyber Masakari means to cut all those cyber attacks to make sure that all the network is secured. And Canada and Japan jointly doing it, and it's enhancing. So that is one very significant move. It has started recently. And also the Canada and Japan are doing their cooperation in Arctic. Or there's a notion of women in peace and security. That is a very important notion of the safety uniform people. But recently, the Japanese self-defense forces dispatched 2 female officers to participate in this conference and seminars. So relations between self-defense forces and Canadian forces are so much deepened. And third, I just want to mention the relationship between the 2 leaders. Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Trudeau get along very well. And January last year, Prime Minister Kishida visited Ottawa and had a very lengthy meetings. And I also joined the very small group luncheon. And the conversation was real, very genuine. No talking point, but they hand in hand. So nice. And when Prime Minister Kishida announced he stepped down from the president of the party, that means that he stepped down from the prime minister. There are 2 G7 leaders who sent a personal letter to him, Biden and Trudeau. And Kishida-san was so pleased. So he posted at SNS that thank you very much, Trudeau-san. So that is so close. And Japanese people remember Prime Minister Trudeau in Hiroshima for the G7 Leaders Summit last year. He was the only G7 leader who visited Peace Memorial Park of Hiroshima twice. The G7 leaders went to the Peace Memorial Park as a part of the official programs. But after the official programs, Prime Minister Trudeau himself, he insisted that he will visit once again together with my team. Because it's so important to see the Peace Memorial Park to refresh his commitment for the nuclear disarmament and arms control. I think that is very real. And Japanese people know it. And that kind of some move was usually kept in confidence, kept in confidential. but somehow the information was leaked and the NHK broadcasted and Japanese people love it. So, and also Prime Minister Trudeau also personally sent the on the SNS congratulate Ishiba-san when he won the party election. So it's so close. And also this is not just a liberal party, because as of yesterday, I had a little opportunity to have the conversation with Mr. Poliev. Not long time, but just a little casual conversation. But he told me that the relations with Japan is so critical for this country. So I'm very much encouraged that. So of course, the two parties are different in so many ways in this distance. But when it comes to the foreign policy or relations with Japan, it's bipartisan. I think that is very, very encouraging. And I should stop around here, but I just want to make sure I mention academic exchange is also very close. And Mank School is a very important institution for the Japanese companies, which is selected as one of top 10 institutions for Japan to emphasize our relations. This is here. And also tomorrow I am invited by the Waterloo University to have the lecture. And in Ottawa, University of Ottawa or University of Carleton University, the embassy has very close relation with the president and the chancellor all the time and the programs. And also in University of Alberta, there's a Japan Center for Research and Education. And that is put the name of Prince Takamoto. This year is the 20th anniversary. We celebrated. We will enhance further programs with that. So not only Zietai or military, not only the leaders, not only the companies, but the academic exchange is also very much real. And also this National Research Council and Japanese Science and Technology Agencies been working together so closely. For both of them are funding agencies. They're selecting also robotics and AI and quantum computing. They are working together for the future. And finally, I just want to mention the exchange program like a JET, Japan Exchange Teaching Program. It's an amazing program, one of the biggest world exchange program. We're proud of that. But I would say Canada is very important part of it. Because all those, in the past 31 years, there are more than 70,000 alumni from all over the world. Half of them are from the United States. But second place, the UK, but 11,000. Third place, Canada, 10,500. No, 10,500. So given that the population, the Canada is playing a big role. And the Japanese students like Canadian teachers. And also think of this way, and Shogun is that's an Emmy Prize. The location was shooted in British Columbia. And all those Japanese food, sake, and also judo, rugby, so many things are going on between our two countries. And finally, two things, the data. The one, according to the latest opinion poll done by some private companies in British Columbia for entire Canada, which country you like most? Japan is the top country. The second is the UK. So we're very proud of that. And also last year, more than 430,000 Canadians visited Japan. It's a historical high. And this year, probably the number will exceed last year. So I would say Canada-Japan relations being sort of getting deeper and deeper and closer and expanding so much. And not just companies, not just the government, but entire people. And also this is great things, given these difficult times of the geopolitics and global warming. I think Canada-Japan relations expansion is inevitable, and we're getting the benefit out of it. And my determination is to do my best to foster friendship and partnership. So thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you so much for those very comprehensive and optimistic remarks as well. I actually, maybe I'll kick off the Q&A with a question related to your last point. So I have many students of mine in the audience who are either taking my classes related to Japan or who are affiliates of our center here. And they're very much interested in Japan and want to think about careers related to Japan or Canada-Japan relations. And I wonder if you have any advice for them based on your experience, because there is so much enthusiasm about Japan among the students these days. When you think about your experience as ambassador in Canada, what kind of words of advice would you give to Canadian students who are seeking to make Japan part of their long-term plans?
Wow, that's a very important question. But yeah, I would say make contact with the companies or embassies or institutions, and probably knocking the door first. Then you get to know people. Then you get the opportunity to work, I think. Because as you may know, in the Japanese companies, usually April is the starting year. Then they hire the freshmen from the university. That is a practice. That started to change. So the people can be hired in the middle of, say, summer or autumn. But that is still, I would say, exceptional. So that means you have to dig the opportunity. That means you have to knock first to get people know. But I would say the embassy can help, and also Ripsi Sensei knows many people. So I think the knocking door first.
Okay, great. Well, with that, I have a lot of substantive questions, but I want everybody to get some questions in. So why don't we open the floor to Q&A? Yes, please, in the front there. If you could introduce yourself.
My name is Nelson Wiseman. I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto in the Department of Political Science. My area of study is Canadian politics. Thank you very much for your very articulate and broad-ranging presentation. What struck me was it had a very strong economic orientation. And the question that I was thinking of when I came here is there was one word I didn't hear in your presentation, of which Canada has an interest, I think, and that is the Quad. And I wonder if you could comment on what is Japan's attitude to potential Canadian participation in the Quad? Because when it was announced, there was a lot of surprise here, it seemed to me, in the foreign policy community and in the defense community.
That's a very, very good question, I think. But I would say that was pretty much driven by we have not heard any sort of straightforward interest in joining Quad, actually, until media started to criticize it. And the Quad itself is a kind of a very delicate balance, I would say. The US, Japan, Australia, and India. And it takes years to come up with this part. So at this juncture, the Quad country doesn't have any intention to include any other countries. 4 countries, too many already to organize it. So now we're paying a lot of attention, effort to proceed Quad as it is. But yeah.
All right.
Really terrific, comprehensive indeed. We really got a good overview. But one challenge that it comes up by way of implication and we can see it coming no matter what happens early November. How can we work together, Canada and Japan, to make sure that we have mutually beneficial and beneficial also to the United States access to the US market? Is there some contingency planning going on? I hope we're planning a very strategic initiative to make sure we stay on the right side of US government, whichever way the political winds blow.
So probably the Canada and Japan are two of the most influenced by the country which got the influence by who is the White House, who is the person who lives in the White House. But at the same time, we do not have support. So we have to think, we have to prepare what might happen after the November 5th. So that's what we do. But I think I would say Canada is the country who knows most of the United States in very profound way. So, and also Japan is a very special country with the United States, the enormous histories and relations. So I think it is very natural for both of us to compare notes and to talk quietly. But the other thing is, I was an assistant minister for economic affairs of the foreign ministry when Trump administration was there. Then I did a lot on those matters to deal with that administration. And I think likewise the many officers in this country have experiences. And so I think that experiences can help to do the things. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yamanouchi. Dr. John Meehan, Director of the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary International History, and named after Bill Graham, former Foreign Minister and Defense Minister of Canada. And my own work has been on Canada's early relations with Japan. Thank you for a very comprehensive overview of the relationship today. And I too was struck, as my colleague was, by your emphasis on economics, trade, strategic metals that are going to be important moving forward. The whole issue, and you touched on it as part of the comprehensive relationship that you described so beautifully, Pacific security. Pacific security, you mentioned the two frigates. Both Canada and Japan and other Pacific nations have an Indo-Pacific strategy. You talked about ours, in which China is described rather negatively, India rather positively. Of course, since then we've had developments in that relationship. As Japan and Canada look toward this region, the two great powers of China and India, but others as well. You mentioned possibility of expanding, I think Prime Minister Ishiba's idea of a NATO for the Pacific might be very ambitious, but what can Canada and Japan do to promote newer ways of looking at Pacific security in a region that faces so many forms of insecurity at the moment?
There are so many things, and I think I just mentioned there's a closer cooperation between the self-defense forces and Canadian forces are deepening so much. In past 5 years, it's been deepened so much, and I think that is a good move. And also, we have action plans to implement all those things which affect the stability and prosperity of the region. So we are on the right track, I think. And also what we could do is to further influence the stability in the region is one of those is TPP. Because I didn't mention TPP much, but the TPP is still the one of the biggest free trade agreement in the world, and the most advanced and high standard. And UK joined recently. So that transforms the significance of TPP. Of course, TPP, if you read all those documentation, that is a free trade agreement. but it has strong connotation of security and geopolitics. And so I think the Canada and Japan together expand TPP. That is the economic bond with the strategic ideas. I think that's what we could do together. And if I may, and this is part of the answer to Professor, and one of the greatest achievements of Prime Minister Kishida is he made a very tough decision. That is double our defense spending in 5 years. This is an amazing decision, and Japanese people support it. Because as you may know, up to recently, Japanese people just believe defense spending is probably below 1% of GDP. But now it's becoming 2%. Why? Because Japanese people realize the tough, harsh reality of geopolitics surrounding Japan. Then when we see Canada is a very blessed country in terms of the location, the south border of the US, Pacific and Atlantic, and protected by the ice of Arctic. But that is now changing. So there are all those security experts advocating that Canada need to increase its defense spending and defense capability. I think that is significantly important when we think of the further economic cooperation.
Isn't that going backwards? I'm sorry. It's going backwards. We're not evolving. We're doubling.
No. We did.
I don't believe that.
We did.
I'm sorry, but I just don't believe that in general. Like our world is not more military.
I said defense spending.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing.
Do you have a question?
I'm sorry. No, I have a comment.
We're taking questions, not comments. Thank you.
It's a comment.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't voice it. This is ridiculous.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Where are we going?
Okay. Hajime Masi, Yamanouchi Kaka. I was thinking about the comment that you're talking about trying to build further agreements with Indigenous peoples on the route over to Prince Rupert. But I'm also thinking about if those ships are sailing across the Pacific and arrive in Hokkaido, what kind of leverage or what kind of best practices could be leveraged from Canada to Hokkaido in terms of trying to further empower the local Ainu Indigenous communities there? Because despite Japan's recognition of the Ainu as an Indigenous people in 2019, a lot of the focus by the government of Japan, at least so far, has been on cultural issues, like, for example, the opening of Ukoboi in Shiraoi in 2020. But there's not necessarily the same on-the-ground presence in terms of trying to develop some of the communities that have majority Ainu populations within Hokkaido. So I'm just curious as to, going forward, are there further ways in which the Japanese and Canadian governments, or more specifically, the Hokkaido government and the provincial governments in places like Alberta and BC can work together in terms of trying to develop further best practices that can help raise awareness and economic prospects and solidarity and cultural issues for Ainu in Hokkaido and also for First Nations, and Métis here in Canada?
Thank you very much for asking this Indigenous group the thing. I have several points I would like to make. And the first, last year, I had the opportunity to visit 3 territories for 11 stops, 10 days. That is organized by the Canadian Foreign Ministry. So 23 ambassadors and high commissioners visited the Northern Territories. I was one of those. Then every day, we met the leaders or people of the Indigenous group. And I just realized, so it all depends. Some people are so critical and so almost hate the federal government. But some people are not that so much. They are seeking a more bright future. And when it comes to the younger generation, they see more opportunities. The elder generation, they remember what happened in the past, and which is very dark. So, but all in all, the reconciliation being going forward. And I think that is good news. And I'll give you one example of the LNG Canada. That is the biggest private investment in this country with 5 major companies, consortium, Shell and Mitsubishi and Petronas and China and Korea. And then, so Mitsubishi people have been working so hard to get understanding of the indigenous group. That is within the British Columbia, from the east side of British Columbia to the Kitimat of the Pacific coast. It's about slightly less than 1,000 kilometers. So many groups are involved. So Mitsubishi people did individual town hall meetings about meetings 12,000 times, 12,000. So they show their honesty, they show their integrity. This is good for your community opportunities. And finally, they agreed upon. So if everything goes well, before the end of this year, first cargo would be shipped to Asia. So that is all those accumulation of the serious effort can make differences to break ice. And also during my trip to Northern Territories, some of the leaders think the ownership is very important when it comes to the development of the critical minerals. And the First Nation people also come together to take risks and to talk. And that is changing very much. So I think, so I just said, this indigenous group, people's understanding, support is necessary, and it's never easy, but I think we can make it. And on the other side, you mentioned Hokkaido. Our history of Ainu or Hokkaido is very different from yours, but still, there's a cooperation going on between the Ainu people and the indigenous people. So I'll give you two examples. One, in Japan, almost every year, we do have the talks on Arctic affairs. In Arctic, there are many elements of the security and the indigenous people and environmental issues and science and businesses. Whenever we have the meeting in Tokyo, some of the representatives of the indigenous groups also join to the meeting on the Arctic. So they are always a very important part of the subject of the discussion on Arctic. And also in Ottawa, there's various meetings going on. So one of those tourism. So the representative of Ainu people also participated to this international conference on tourism in Ottawa. Then they are talking about how to show their tradition and culture and art to the travelers. And those cooperations being also going on. So in many ways, in many different levels, meetings and discussions being going on. And all of those are contributing to the further reconciliation in this country.
Well, thank you. And with that, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I would like to thank again the embassy staff and the Munk School staff for making this event possible, and the audience for your excellent questions, and apologies to our overflow audience in the hallways. We had a higher turnout than anticipated, but please take some sandwiches on your way out. There's free lunch, so be sure to grab that on your way out. And of course, last but not least, to Ambassador Yamanouchi for a really thought-provoking and stimulating conversation. We look forward to having you again. Thank you.